Have you ever wondered if the grass is greener on the other side? Well, today we're diving into a classic story that explores just that. The timeless tale of the town mouse and the country mouse. It's a story about two cousins, two very different worlds, and one big life lesson. So grab a cozy spot, and let's get started. Once upon a time, deep in the heart of a sun-drenched meadow, lived a humble country mouse. His name was Barley, and his home was a simple but cozy burrow tucked beneath the roots of a great oak tree. Barley's life was straightforward and peaceful. Every morning, he'd wake up to the sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of leaves. His pantry was always stocked with the finest things the countryside had to offer: plump acorns, sweet clover, juicy wild berries, and the crunchiest sweet stalks. He worked hard, gathering his food, but he also had plenty of time to nap in the warm sunshine and listen to the crickets' evening song. Life was good, simple, and safe. One day, a letter arrived, carried by a friendly beetle. It was from his cousin Remy, who lived in the bustling city. Remy was coming for a visit. Barley was overjoyed. He tidied his burrow, polished his best acorn cups, and prepared a feast fit for a king, or at least a very important city cousin. He laid out a spread of his finest dried grains, a handful of sweet, sun-ripened berries, and a refreshing dewdrop served on a clean leaf. He couldn't wait to show Remy the simple joys of country life. When Remy arrived, he looked quite different from Barley. He was sleek and well-fed, wearing a tiny, sophisticated air about him. He sniffed at the country air, a little disdainfully. "My dear Barley," he said, wrinkling his nose, "is this truly how you live?" He poked at a grain of wheat. "Barely edible. And the quiet. It's deafening. How do you stand it?" Barley, a bit taken aback, tried to explain. "But Remy, this is the freshest food you can find, and the peace and quiet, it's wonderful. It's safe here." Remy just laughed. "Safe? My dear cousin, you're not living, you're just existing. In the city, we have real food. Feasts every single night, cakes, cheeses, pastries. Things you can only dream of. The city is where life truly happens. It's exciting, it's vibrant, it's everything." He paused, a grand idea forming in his mind. "You must come back with me. I'll show you how to truly live." Barley was hesitant. The city sounded loud and dangerous. But Remy's descriptions of delicious food were incredibly tempting. He'd never tasted cake or cheese before. The thought of such luxury was dazzling. After a little more convincing, Barley's curiosity got the better of him. He agreed to go. "All right," he said, "I'll come and see this grand life of yours." So, under the cover of dusk, the two cousins set off. The journey itself was an ordeal for poor Barley. They hitched a ride on the back of a rumbling cart, the noise and shaking making his whiskers tremble. The air grew thick with smoke and strange smells. Bright lights flashed everywhere, and the noise. The noise was a constant roar of wheels, shouts, and sounds he couldn't even identify. It was nothing like the gentle hum of his meadow. Barley felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. This was all a bit too much. Finally, they arrived at Remy's home. It wasn't a cozy burrow, but a small crack in the wall of a massive, magnificent house. "Welcome," Remy declared with a grand sweep of his paw, "to paradise." As night fell, Remy led Barley into the dining room. Barley's jaw dropped. Before him was a table laden with the most incredible leftovers he had ever seen. There were mountains of half-eaten cake, crumbs of rich cheese, dollops of creamy pudding, and shimmering jellies. It was more food than Barley had seen in his entire life. His eyes widened, his tummy rumbled, and for a moment he forgot all his fears. "See?" Remy whispered, his eyes gleaming. "Didn't I tell you? Let's feast." They scurried onto the table and began to nibble. The cake was sweeter than any honey Barley had ever tasted. The cheese was sharp and savory, a flavor explosion in his mouth. He thought that maybe, just maybe, Remy was right. This was the life. He was so engrossed in a delicious piece of pastry that he didn't hear the approaching danger. Suddenly, the dining room door creaked open. A giant shadow fell over the table. "Quick! Hide!" Remy shrieked. Two enormous, terrifying dogs bounded into the room, barking furiously. Their barks were like thunder, shaking the very table beneath their paws. The two mice scrambled for their lives, their feast forgotten. They dove back into their crack in the wall, hearts pounding in their chests. Barley was trembling from head to tail. Once the dogs were gone, Barley peeked out. What was that? He squeaked, his voice barely a whisper. Oh, just the house pets, Remy said, trying to sound casual, though he was shaking a bit himself. They can be a nuisance. But don't worry, the coast is clear. Let's go back for more. Barley wasn't so sure. His appetite had vanished. But before he could protest, Remy was already leading him back to the table. They cautiously began to eat again, but Barley couldn't relax. Every little creak and groan of the house made him jump. Their second attempt at a meal was cut short, even more dramatically. A woman entered the room, and spotting them, let out a piercing scream. Mice! She yelled, and then a huge fluffy cat with eyes like green fire leaped onto the table. Its claws extended. They scurried away in a panic, the cat hot on their tails. They barely made it back to the safety of their hole, the cat's claws swiping just inches from Barley's tail. This time Barley was truly terrified. He could still feel the swish of air from the cat's claws. He huddled in the back of the dark crack, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at Remy, who was trying to catch his breath. Is this what you call living? Barley asked, his voice trembling. Feasting in fear? Constantly running for your life? I can't do this, Remy. Remy didn't have a clever reply this time. He just looked down at his paws. Barley continued, a newfound resolve in his voice. Your cakes and cheeses are wonderful, I admit, but you have to eat them with death looming over your shoulder. I would rather have my simple grains and berries in peace and safety than the richest feast in the world with this constant terror. He looked at his cousin with sad eyes. Thank you for showing me the city, Remy, but I'm going home. And so, before the sun even rose, Barley slipped out of the grand house. He made the long journey back to his meadow, his heart feeling lighter with every step he took away from the city. When he finally arrived at his own cozy burrow, he took a deep, long breath of the clean, fresh air. He nibbled on a simple acorn, and it tasted better than all the cake in the world. He realized that the simple life he had, filled with peace and security, was the richest life of all. The grass wasn't greener on the other side. It was just a different shade of green, and his shade was the one that made him truly happy. And from that day on, the country mouse lived happily and contentedly in his peaceful meadow, never again wishing for a life that wasn't his own. So, what do you think? It's a great reminder that happiness isn't always about having more, but about appreciating what you have. Sometimes the simplest things in life are the most valuable. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more classic tales. See you next time.
Once upon a time, in the vast sun-drenched savannas of Africa, lived a giraffe named Gary. Now Gary was a magnificent creature, with a coat like a patchwork quilt of caramel and cream, and legs so long they looked like stilts. His neck was the longest, most elegant neck anyone had ever seen, reaching high into the leafy canopies of the acacia trees. From the ground to the tip of his ossicones, Gary was, without a doubt, the tallest giraffe in his herd, and maybe even the whole savanna. You might think Gary would be proud of his incredible height. The other giraffes certainly were. Oh, Gary, they'd say, you can see for miles. You must spot the juiciest leaves before anyone else. The zebras would look up in awe, and the little meerkats would stand on their tiptoes, just trying to see his face. But here's a secret, a big secret that Gary kept tucked away in his very large heart. Gary hated being tall. He didn't want to be magnificent. He wanted to be small. Every morning was a struggle. When he woke up, he had to be so careful not to knock his head on the low-hanging branches of his favorite sleeping tree. Drinking water was a whole ordeal, a clumsy, awkward splay of his front legs just to reach the waterhole, making him feel wobbly and ridiculous. While the other animals could huddle together during a cool evening, Gary felt like a lonely skyscraper, with the wind whistling past his ears. His biggest frustration, though, was playing hide-and-seek. It was his favorite game, but he was terrible at it. No matter where he hid, behind a giant baobab tree or a chunky rock formation, his long neck always gave him away. "Found you, Gary." The other young animals would giggle, pointing at his head peeking over the top. Gary would sigh, his long neck drooping with disappointment. He longed to be able to curl up behind a small bush like a gazelle, or disappear into the tall grass like a cheetah cub. He dreamed of being short. One day, Gary decided he'd had enough. He was going to find a way to become shorter. He'd heard whispers from the traveling parrots about a wise old tortoise named Solomon who lived at the edge of the savannah, near the misty mountains. They said Solomon knew the secrets of the earth and sky and could answer any question. With a determined flick of his tail, Gary set off on his quest. The journey was long. He walked past herds of wildebeest that parted like a great river around him. He saw elephants bathing in muddy pools, their small eyes watching him pass. After several days, he finally reached the misty mountains and found a small, quiet grove. There, basking on a warm, flat rock, was Solomon the tortoise. His shell was ancient, covered in patterns that looked like a map of the world. Gary approached cautiously. "Excuse me, wise Solomon," he said, his voice a nervous rumble. Solomon slowly opened one eye. "Well, well, well. A visitor from the sky," the tortoise said, his voice slow and gravelly like stones rolling downhill. "What brings a giant like you to my humble home?" Taking a deep breath, Gary poured out his heart. He told Solomon about the bumped heads, the clumsy drinking, and his terrible record at hide and seek. "I just want to be short," Gary finished, his voice trembling slightly. "Can you help me? Is there a magic spell or a special plan that can make me shrink?" Solomon listened patiently, not interrupting once. When Gary was done, the old tortoise was silent for a long time. Gary waited, his ears twitching with anticipation. Finally Solomon spoke. "Magic to make you shorter? I know of no such thing." "But," he said, holding up a wrinkled foot to stop Jerry's sigh of disappointment, "perhaps you are looking for the wrong kind of magic. Tell me, what would you do if you were short?" Gary hadn't really thought that far. "Well," he stammered, I could play hide and seek properly. I could hide anywhere." Solomon nodded slowly. "I see. Hiding is important to you. Why don't you try something? Instead of trying to change who you are, try changing how you see the world." He pointed a leathery foot towards the grove. "Look around you. This grove has many hiding places. Why don't you try to find one right now?" Gary looked around. It seemed impossible. He was a giant in a small grove. But he wanted to show the wise tortoise he was serious. He looked at a thick bush, too small. He looked at a fallen log, too low. Then his eyes fell upon a deep shadow cast by a cluster of huge ancient rocks. The shadow was long and dark. An idea sparked in his mind. It was a different kind of hiding. Carefully, Gary positioned himself so his entire body lined up perfectly within that dark shadow. He stood completely still, his patterned coat blending with the dappled light and dark patches of the rocks and ground. He wasn't behind something. He was a part of the scenery. Solomon chuckled softly. "Now stay right there." The old tortoise ambled off, and a few minutes later, he returned with a few friends, a clever monkey named Milo and a sharp-eyed eagle named Kira. "My friends," Solomon announced, "there is a giraffe hiding in this grove. The first one to find him gets this juicy mango." Milo scrambled up trees, peering behind every leaf. Kira soared high above, her gaze scanning every inch of the ground. They searched and searched. 10 minutes passed. Milo was getting frustrated, and even Kira was circling with a puzzled look. "Are you sure, Solomon?" Kira called down. "I can't see a thing." Jerry's heart was pounding with a new kind of excitement. He wasn't just hiding, he was invisible. Finally, Solomon called out, "All right, Gary, you can come out now." Gary took one step out of the shadow into the sunlight. Milo gasped, and Kira let out a surprised squawk. "You were there the whole time." Milo chattered. "Your coat, it looked just like the rocks and shadows. That's the best hiding I've ever seen." Gary felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the sun. He hadn't shrunk an inch, but he had won at hide and seek. He looked at Solomon, his eyes full of gratitude. "You were right," Gary said. "The magic wasn't about changing my size." Solomon smiled a slow, wise smile. "Your height is a part of you, Gary. It gives you a unique view of the world. But it doesn't have to define everything you do. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from using what you have in a new way." Gary said his goodbyes and began his long walk home. But this time, the journey felt different. He noticed how his height allowed him to see the distant storm clouds, and he was able to warn a family of warthogs to find shelter. He spotted a patch of the sweetest, most tender acacia leaves at the very top of a tree, which he eagerly shared with the shorter giraffes in his herd when he returned. When the young animals asked for a game of hide and seek, Gary eagerly joined in. He didn't try to cram himself behind a bush. Instead, he used his newfound skill. He would stand beside a tall patchy tree, blending in perfectly. He would lie down in the tall yellow grass, his long neck looking just like a fallen branch. He became the undisputed champion of hide and seek. Gary, the tall giraffe, never wished to be short again. He learned that what he once saw as his biggest problem was actually his greatest gift. He just needed to look at it from a different perspective. And from his great height, he now had the best perspective of all. He was Gary, the tall, clever, and very happy giraffe. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.